Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic. We begin this week with foreign affairs. Kim Jong Un crossed the South Korean border this week to begin formal diplomatic talks with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The North Korean dictator struck a generally conciliatory tone at the talks, and both nations resolved to formally end the Korean War, which is currently only in armistice status, and move towards denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This week also saw French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel come to Washington to visit with the lobotomized orangutan currently occupying the Oval Office. Macron addressed both houses of Congress, giving a well-received speech calling for multilateralism, cooperation, and environmental protection, in marked contrast to Trump and the Republicans' far-right irrational agenda. This week also saw the confirmation of former CIA Director Mike Pompeo to the position of Secretary of State, replacing the recently fired Rex Tillerson. Despite his lie by omission about serving in the Gulf War, his heavy links to the far-right Koch brothers, and his general far-right Christian dominionist views. In agency news, White House Dr. Ronny Jackson's VA nomination went up in flames this week. Jackson was nominated after the previous Veterans Affairs Secretary, David Shulkin, an Obama-era holdover, was fired for being against VA privatization. Jackson, who was not properly vetted by the White House and was obviously unqualified for the job to begin with, given his lack of managerial experience, withdrew from consideration after allegations of misconduct on the job. Jackson allegedly got into a power struggle with another doctor, gave out pills to anyone who wanted them, prescribed medication for himself, was repeatedly drunk on the job, and also managed to wreck a government vehicle while under the influence. The allegations came to light after Democratic ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee, Senator John Tester's office, released a report detailing allegations they received from people who worked with Jackson in the past. Trump is now furious with Senator Tester and is pledging political retaliation. Scott Pruitt was also dragged in to testify before Congress this week, with Democrats grilling him on his anti-environment agenda, corruption, and abuse of taxpayer resources. Republicans predictably defended Pruitt, saying that this was all somehow to derail the administration's pollution agenda, and this was all somehow a witch hunt, the normal Republican whinery. Pruitt has recently pushed to stop the EPA from using science under the guise of so-called accountability, and is currently working hard to destroy the planet. At the Interior Department, the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs resigned after only 6 months on the job, stepping down after unlawfully reassigning federal employees as retaliation against them for opposing components of the administration's extremist agenda. The Interior Department, under Secretary Ryan Zinke, has been yet another example of a cesspool of corruption, prioritizing corporate interests over protecting our public lands, and with extravagant spending by Zinke. Much like Pruitt, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD Secretary Ben Carson is working to continue to screw the poor by trying to add work requirements and tripling the rent of people in public housing assistance. This is in marked contrast to HUD's coddling of rich developers like Trump and Sean Hannity, with Sean Hannity recently having been revealed to have received considerable assistance from HUD, after which he began raising rents and evicting people. OMB Director Mick Mulvaney has continued to destroy the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and he recently publicly solicited donations from bankers for his fellow Republican crooks. This administration is going to continue their corrupt war on working families until they are all removed from office and jailed afterwards. Congress was also in the news this week, as anti-Catholic sentiment within the Republican caucus and pro-poor people statements led history's douchiest House Speaker, Paul Ryan, to fire the then House chaplain, a Jesuit priest. Republicans in Congress are also reportedly considering restarting their effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, with the effort being spearheaded by our nation's foremost Christian dominionist piece of boring white bread, Mike Pence. Congressional Republicans further held a hearing on social media issues this week, bringing in two of the dumbest people I have ever seen, Diamond and Silk, to Trump-supporting black women, a sentence that is still somewhat hard to believe that anyone is saying. These two, it should be noted, are complete morons. They previously claimed that Hillary was somehow responsible for Russia getting a nuclear weapon, despite the fact that it happened in the late 1940s under Stalin. So unless Hillary is somehow secretly Ethel Rosenberg, I don't think this is how anything works. Basically a bunch of right-wing conspiracy theorists. The hearing was a ridiculous farce and a textbook exercise in conservative whininess and fake martyrdom. And I will not go further into the hearing, except to note that the two idiots from the minstrel show managed to perjure themselves before the committee by lying to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas about being paid by the Trump campaign. Unrelated news, Facebook is increasingly worried about possible government regulation and oversight of their activities, and is now hiring all Republican lobbyists and reaching out to conservative groups to oppose any form of new law or regulation. Facebook is already under a consent decree with the FCC from 2014 with relation to consumer data privacy. Facebook is once again proving the threat to democracy and freedom that unaccountable private power is. Laws can and should be passed to protect people's privacy and provide oversight. After all, it was Justice Louis Brandeis of the Supreme Court who said, "We can have either democracy or the concentration of great wealth in a few hands. We cannot have both." In election news, Republicans narrowly won a House election in Arizona on Tuesday. Republicans and their associated groups spent millions in the district to head off a possible upset by Democrats in Arizona's 8th Congressional District. The district was originally occupied by Republican Trent Franks, who was forced to resign after harassment allegations. Republican Debbie Lesko pulled off a relatively narrow 5-point win in the predominantly old and white district, which previously went for Trump by 21 points in 2016. In other Republican sexual harasser news, Republican Congressman Patrick Meehan of Pennsylvania resigned in order to avoid an investigation by the House Ethics Committee of allegations relating to him harassing a much younger staffer in his employment. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf will now have to select a time for a special election, though given the timing of this resignation, it is possible that he could choose to delay it so that it is concurrent with this November's midterms. Meanwhile, in West Virginia, coal baron and convicted felon Don Blankenship is facing attacks by outside Republican groups backed by Mitch McConnell and the state's Republican Senate primary to challenge Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. Blankenship is regarded as an unelectable candidate on the level of Roy Moore, given his past felony conviction and prison time for ignoring federal mine safety rules, which led to the Big Branch mine disaster that killed 29 miners. Blankenship has also had a record of pollution and general anti-union and anti-worker sentiment when serving as the CEO of Massey Energy. Nevertheless, Blankenship is still forging ahead and attacking Mitch McConnell while he's at it. Democrats have some of their own problems, though. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez was recently admonished this week by the Senate Ethics Committee for receiving gifts in the past. Menendez dodged a corruption conviction related to those gifts earlier this year, though he is still a heavy favorite to win re-election this November in the state of New Jersey, given the state's Democratic tilt and his lack of a viable Democratic opponent in the primary. In Colorado, a Democratic congressional primary was shaken up after the release of a tape with Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer pressuring a more progressive candidate to drop out in order to clear the field for a candidate backed by more establishment Democrats. To be clear, this is not exactly particularly unusual in politics, but it is emblematic of the current ongoing fight between the establishment and more progressive wings of the Democratic Party. Next, we turn once again to the Russia scandal and Trump's related corruption. Trump attorney and fixer Michael Cohen will be pleading the fifth in his ongoing lawsuit with regard to the Stormy Daniels mess. For the record, pleading the Fifth is a right under the Constitution, and not an admission of guilt, although Trump himself said that only the mob takes the Fifth. That was in relation to Hillary, but still applies, I think, unless Trump is a hypocrite. That can't possibly be true, is it? In Russian news, there was reports of a previously secret meeting between former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the Russian ambassador at the time, Sergei Kislyak. Flynn was fired by Trump after a political firestorm surrounding his Russia contacts, with the official reasoning being that he lied to Vice President Mike Pence about said Russian contacts. Flynn's son, another right-wing nut whose lobotomy wasn't complete enough, recently contradicted that official version of events, though, claiming that Flynn had not lied to Pence about his Russian contacts, possibly implicating Pence in this entire mess. This comes as the Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, that Trump's people met with, confessed this week to being an informant for the Kremlin. Trump's son, Don Jr., his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his then-campaign manager, Paul Manafort, met with Veselnitskaya during the campaign in order to get dirt on Hillary Clinton, something they subsequently attempted to cover up by releasing some statement about how the meeting was about adoptions, something that really no one involved believed. Kushner has also met with Russian representatives in an effort to get financing for his financially disastrous acquisition of the 666 Fifth Avenue property. Trump campaign official and subsequent White House advisor Steve Bannon is now under scrutiny as the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower stated that they were ordered to test messaging on Vladimir Putin and Putin's actions by Bannon. Cambridge Analytica is largely funded by the far-right billionaire Mercer family, and who were key to Trump's victory in the 2016 election. And the company is already under investigation for their campaigns on behalf of Trump and Brexit using improperly obtained Facebook data. Mercer himself is currently in a fight with the IRS over back taxes. The NRA is separately bracing for an investigation into its Russia ties, as the organization disclosed recently that it had received foreign money, and has plenty of suspicious links to the Putin government, including close links with a member of the Russian parliament. So the NRA, if we're keeping track, are now lobbyists for merchants of death, supporters of domestic terrorism, and traitors to America. Great people. Republicans, for the most part, have continued to help cover up this administration's crimes. The House Intelligence Committee's Republican majority released a report after their farcical investigation, supposedly clearing Trump of collusion, after effectively refusing to actually investigate the stupid bastard. There was better luck in the Senate, though, as the Senate Judiciary Committee recently cleared a bill on a bipartisan basis to protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller from being arbitrarily fired by Trump. Republican Senate Majority Turtle Mitch McConnell has vowed to block the bill from ever coming to the floor for a vote, though. For the most part, the entire Republican Party and conservative movement is, quite frankly, filled with anti-American fifth columnists and their fellow travelers. For the most part, at this point, you can no longer be a patriotic American, or even a decent person, and still be a conservative or a Republican. These people are American fascists. After all, it was Sinclair Lewis who said that fascism would come to America. When fascism came to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. Well, that sounds like a very, very accurate description of the modern Republican Party. Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.